Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Accidental CEO podcast. Today I had Sway Jitty with me on the podcast. She is an amazing, multi-passionate, multi-business owner, entrepreneur, like many of us. We had a great conversation about not letting the regular labels that are out there limit you, making sure that you tap into the resources that you have, the skills that you have, the passions that you have to build your business, that you really allow that to become part of your brand. You don't have to niche down into one specific area, one specific product or service. It is completely fine, 100% proven to be successful, to be multi passionate and offer different services and different products. So, I hope this podcast really helps you see the possibilities that are out there for you and all the great things that you can accomplish by being true to yourself, being authentic, and really focus on what makes you happy and really using that as the backbone and the structure for building your business. I can't wait to dive in. Let's do it. Welcome to the Accidental CEO podcast, where we bridge the gap between the creativity you love and the CEO mindset you need. I'm your host, Nada Salvatore, wedding photographer and business educator. Find full show notes and resources at accidentalceopod.com. Let's get into today's episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Accidental CEO podcast. I'm your host, Nada Salvatore, and today I have Sway Jitty with me. She is a business and alignment strategy guide for creatives, multi-passionate people like many of us, and she's also a multi-business owner herself. So welcome to the podcast, Sway.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is such a fun space that you've created, and I'm just so excited to see what portal this space and this conversation opens up for us.
Yeah, we're very grateful to have you here. So tell us just a little bit about you, your businesses. What do you offer to people? What do you do? And then we'll backtrack a little bit and dig into how you got there.
Awesome. Well, the first place to start is I am as multifaceted and as multidimensional as it comes. And I'm very unconventional in the way I take my multidimensionality and multifacetedness. But if I had to put myself and explain myself in 3 words, it would be I'm an artist, I'm an oracle, and I'm an entrepreneur. And I usually say if creativity, mysticism, and entrepreneurship had a baby, that would be me in more than many ways. My work in all the spaces that I show up in, it really is to open up room for sacred expression. And what I mean by sacred expression is to be so in alignment with our creativity that we don't doubt ourselves as the creatives, as we're creating, as we're pouring out into the world. And we find our value or our worth in who we are in our presence instead of what we actually bring to the table. I think that's my core message through and through. I'm big on impact. I'm big on having the 2 polar opposites of our world, whether that's the strategic point of view or the mindset point of view, the energetics. I love bringing the duality and the core principles in the duality to exist at the same time. So that's me in a nutshell.
I'm sure I can tell already you're going to have lots to dive in and explore in our conversation. So share a little bit about your journey as a multi-passionate entrepreneur, especially, looking at the backdrop of you had some family that was, into the entrepreneur world, and how did that kind of play into your desire to become an entrepreneur, and how did you navigate all of that?
It's so funny. This particular question is so funny because I don't think my family ever allowed me to feel like I could create my own. It always was like, oh, it's wealth that will just trickle down in the generations and you will be a part of what we're creating. But I think there was always this unconscious thing. And to give context to this unconscious thing, I come from a family where everybody was doing their own thing. My mom, my dad, every single person from my mom's side and my dad's side were very much, we will create our own thing. They detested 9 to 5. Like it was the biggest ick in their life. My dad was an investor. He did a lot of investing. He had a lot of different ventures. My mom was very heavy into charity work, into creating spaces and ventures that allowed, her to give back to the collective. And as I watched primarily my parents, I kept on noticing how what they were doing in comparison to what they were telling me to do was vastly different. It was almost like they were like, we've taken the risks and you can reap our harvest, you can reap our fruits when it's your time, but you don't need to take those risks because it's too much. And I believe that came from a place of love. But they raised a rebellious, label defying child. I grew up. I mean, my dad used to take me to his meetings and I would just sit there and just watch those men in suits. My mom would take me to her charity events. I would watch her charm a whole room of people into getting funds for a specific cause that she felt so passionate about. So I was there and I'm like, okay, I want to do something of my own. But my way of going about things was a little different in the sense that I had a very creative lens to the way I wanted to create something. Whereas my parents were very strategic. They were like, oh, there is point A, point B, point C. Whereas I'm like, there's point A, and then there's point A, point one, and then A, point two. And that didn't sit well with my parents because they were like, no, we've taken the risks. We know better. And I would always say, but I have your genes. I think I'm a collection of what you have created and you've taught me so much, but I cannot be what you want me to be or what you desire for me to be as someone who's part of this lineage if I'm not allowed to take risks. And that's kind of where my journey began. I remember specifically my parents were very heavy into like, okay, have a backup plan, always have a backup plan. For me, as I was growing up, I was like, no, I don't want to have a backup plan. I'm more of a tank. I just go into things head first. I allow the logic to follow later. And so I want to paint the picture. I was 10 years old. I was in a room full of my classmates, and the teacher was specifically asking us to do one task, which was come up front and tell everyone, what do you want to be when you grow up? All my peers, they had one identity that they wanted to be. It was my turn. And I was at the bottom of the list because it was alphabetical order of coming up. I go in front of the class and I'm like, I want to be this, I want to be this, I want to be this, and I want to be this. And that was the first time I felt this awareness of my fluid identity being a cause for people to laugh at me instead of with me. And in that moment, that was a big shift for me because I stood there and I could hear in the laughter my own parents kind of going like, no, but you have to stick to the blueprint we have tried out, the conventional, the traditional that we have gone through. But I heard a little voice in me say, if this is how you desire to show up in the world, you can't be wrong. And that kind of led me to having the biggest motto of my life, that what I desires me right the fuck back. So that's kind of what led me to becoming everything that I do. As an artist, I'm a poet, I'm a writer, I'm a singer-songwriter, I'm a music director, music video director, creative director. As an entrepreneur, I have a media and events company. I have a creative agency. I have a private practice as a psychotherapist, and the list just goes on. But in all of these spaces, I have made a promise to myself that I'm going to be true to my unconventionality and show up in my defying labels, multidimensional as fuck unconventionality. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
That's awesome. I mean, I feel like are your parents, do you have any immigrants in your family?
Yes, both of them. I'm a very multiracial child. My dad's from one end of the world. My mom's from another end of the world.
Yeah. Where are they from?
My dad's half Hispanic, half Bangladeshi. My mom's Palestinian.
Yeah. So I can see a lot of what you're describing, what happened to you and your parents as part of something I struggle with. So I have kids now. And I came from another country as well and went through that whole process that you described, your parents described. We took the risks and we worked hard and we did all the crazy things. And now we built this very stable environment that our kids are growing up in. And, how much of that is going to shape who they are, right? So we know a lot of the experiences that we go through shape who we are. And I would love for them to have very strong personalities and be successful and be driven and have resilience, things that you don't get unless you struggle a little bit. There's a lot of things that you can develop if you don't go through things. So how do I balance giving them the opportunity to do that versus allowing them to also enjoy the things that I've created for them, that I worked so hard for. So it's such a hard thing as a parent. So I definitely understand where your parents are coming from.
Yeah.
But
It took me a while to understand that. Now as a mom, I definitely resonate with that.
it's a struggle.
It is. It really is. But, I've leaned into the idea of not having expectations. I feel like I'm going to be my daughter's backup plan. If she ever wants any day, she's like, I can't do this anymore. I'm so tired of the risks. I'm like, come home. We've got everything. If you need that break, I'm here.
It's such a struggle to figure it out, like how to give that opportunity without depriving them of the things that we created for them and all that. Because I do believe it does help create who you are and generate a lot of the personality traits that we take into our adulthood. But the other thing I wanted to talk a little bit more about is this idea of how important it is to really feel comfortable stepping into who you are and not following society norms and labels, and in really finding a good space to exist, and then taking that and using that as a thread between the decisions that you make and the businesses that you create, and all of that. So super important to show up in this like you do, being authentic, being yourself, which is not easy to do. It's like a lot of people struggle with that. We know that that's the best way to do it, and that puts you into a position to be more successful. So how do you guide people that you work with to really find this place where they can feel comfortable and really explore who they are and bleed that into their businesses and the things that they're working on?
Yeah, I love that question. I focus on visionary leadership. And the people that I usually work with are what I call visionary catalysts. That means these are people who understand that their creativity has impact just by them existing, just by them creating their art, however that art takes form in their business, in the way that they move about life. They have full recognition that whatever they create, the byproduct of that, one of the byproducts of that is their success and their impact. And so for visionary catalysts who are driven by, their ideas, their downloads, and they want to bring that change about into the world, the biggest thing I love talking about with them or guiding them towards is how can you look at yourself as a leader in your own right? And what I mean is individual evolution for collective evolution. A lot of times when, and I had traditional mentors at the beginning of my career when I've been in this space for about a decade now. At the start of my entrepreneurial journey, I had a mentor who sat me down and told me, you have to do things this particular way, and only then can you branch out. And obviously, I did not like hearing that. I was like, no, but I want to do it my way. And I remember feeling so frustrated. But when I sat down with myself and I questioned, is this frustration towards my mentor? Is this frustration towards society? Or is this frustration towards the fact that I want to do something about it, but I'm not? I'm just sitting in this bubble of like, I want to do something about it. I want to do something about it, but I'm really not. I'm not moving that energy. This is the big thing about visionary leadership as creatives. As creatives, we're always kind of stuck in the dreamer state. So I always say that there's the state of being a dreamer, and then there's a state of being a visionary, and there's always a bridge in between. The bridge in between is aligned action. The aligned action is about how can you show up in your own way without subscribing to what's out there. In terms of authenticity, how do you do that? I feel that oftentimes we get stuck in the starving artist image. To break it down, the starving artist image, there are two parts to it. One, society tells us art is not valuable in any way, shape, or form. So that already deters us a little bit, like, oh, so I guess don't create art. Then second, when we do have, we get the balls to create art and we're like, oh, great, we finally did it. We created art. Then society tells us, oh, hold up. Now we get to tell you what is the value of your art. That is a loop that over and over again stimulates us to think that our art inherently is never going to be valuable. And that's where the conditioning comes through, where since your art is not valuable, you have to bring other things to the table. Which is why a lot of the times the people that I work with, they keep thinking like, oh, I have a marketing problem. I have a sales problem. No, you don't have a marketing problem. You don't have a sales problem. You don't need to learn things that are not part of your genius zone. I truly believe that the skill sets and the strengths that we have, we can automatically turn those skill sets and those strengths into places or in areas in a way that benefits us. So you don't have to be a marketing guru, but the way you are as a creative, you can still apply that in your marketing. The way you are as a creative, you can still apply that in your sales. The way you are as a creative, you can still apply that as a speaker, as a facilitator, all of that shebang. So the biggest place of authenticity is realizing you don't need to learn a new skill to adapt in these changing times. Why do I say that? As a multidimensional person, I'm a big believer that we live in a world that says it is niche oriented, but there's so much proof out there that it's not. Let's take examples of some of the biggest brands, Gucci, Versace. Okay. They are luxury brands. And on the forefront, it seems like they have a very specific niche. But when we really think about it, Versace has products that are completely different to each other. They have fashion, they have, perfume, they have artistic projects that are completely different from one another. So the niche in itself is the experience of the brand rather than the product. What society tells us as artists is that no, it has to be very specific to how that authenticity is shaped, how that experience is shaped. So this is where to be showing up as an authentic person and to kind of weave that into your entrepreneurial spaces, no matter where you show up, is to recognize that as a creative, how can you take inventory of your creativity? And I think this is where most of the creatives get stuck, especially in the mindset area. There are a lot of things in the terms of mindset that blocks creatives, but specifically the one that doesn't get talked about a lot is how, as a creative, can you do things that you are not used to doing? That is not your genius zone. That's purely because society continuously says, like, you have to learn marketing, you have to learn sales. No, all you have to do is take a moment, reflect with yourself. What is your skill set? What are your strengths that is directly aligned with you, is authentic to you, that you can still use in a different area, that you can still apply yourself as a creative? I think that's the most authentic fucking thing you can do and still be seen for all that you are.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. As a coach, that's the exact reason why I wanted to combine business strategies with mindset, because most of the time when I sit down with somebody to work on their business, what really ends up happening is we are diving into some limiting beliefs, we're changing mindsets. We cannot outcharge how you feel about yourself, your self-worth. There's a lot that goes into that. So really diving into that and using that as the main focus of your growth and finding that identity, I 100% agree. It's very, very important. You mentioned that you don't believe in having a single niche, which I love that as a multi-passionate person. We need more of that. I feel like we hear it way too often. And I like the idea of looking at the niche as the client experience and not the product and service themselves. So how do you balance having a diverse interest in so many ventures, specifically to the issue of not spreading yourself out too thin?
I would love to start with bringing attention to what I mentioned in the previous response. Visionary leadership, which is being a visionary, everything is about innovation. Everything is about focusing on looking at the idea and see how you can bring that idea to life. Visionary leadership is to be seen as that and received as that. A lot of times in traditional coaching, traditional, way of looking at business and traditional leadership or thought leadership, people often say, like, you need to niche down, you need to niche down. But that is not beneficial in any way, because even when we look at our products, I'm someone who specializes in even helping people create very unique experiential products. And when we look at a product, that when a product gets created, there are so many facets to that product that if you had to niche a product down, you couldn't. And oftentimes when clients actually sign up with us or mentees sign up with us or they go through an experience, they recognize that themselves, like, oh, right, I signed up for this, but I got like 3, 4, 5, 6 other things alongside. And that's the beauty of running or being in the space of having your own art being your business. But specifically about how to kind of balance it out, I say that when you are focusing on thought leadership, you should focus on cultivating a brand that's around you that kind of branches out on based on your values. This is what I call the golden theme. The golden theme basically talks about how you want to be represented as the visionary instead of the things you do. So that means inherently when someone comes to your brand and they want to garner interest in your different ventures. So for example, my creative agency and my media and events house, completely different spaces, but they have one thing that connects them, which is my values, my vision, my ideas, my way of envisioning these spaces. When we think about these two different spaces, they have their own niche universes. I call them niche universes instead of niches. The niche universe focuses on multiple things that the brand really values and stands for and wants to create or curate in their experience. So when we talk about branding for multidimensional people like us, the focus with visionary leadership is to show up with your presence instead of what you bring to the table. So focus more on who am I? What are my values? What do I like? Instead of this is what I do. This is what I do and this is what I do. And based on that, you're able to have a tribe, a community that is interested in whatever you bring to the table. Because the experience you're curating or creating based on your presence, based on your way of moving in life in itself is an experience, which allows them to keep coming back for more, keep coming back for more. And that's where the interest gets garnered. Like, oh, okay, so Sway's doing another venture. She's doing another project. I want to know. I want to know what's that about. When you have this kind of space where you show up as a visionary leadership, you're creating a very, very unique concoction of thought leadership for your brand. That's where you can have that balance of showing up in a non-niche way for yourself.
How do you recommend people share this message of who they are in relationship to their brand and their business? To give me some practical examples of how you guide your clients through that.
Awesome. So I actually really like this. The first example is networking. Whenever I go into a networking space, and I recommend this with my mentees as well, whenever you go into a recommending space, watch how you pitch yourself. Are you pitching yourself like, hey, I'm this, and insert title, insert title, insert title, and I help statement? Or are you actually allowing the conversation to be organic? What is the space that you're going in with? Every time that we go into a networking space, this is my first recommendation, go in with listening first. As a multidimensional person, we are so invested in our creations and ideas that often the world is speaking to us. What I mean by that is you could meet someone down the road and you're having a conversation with them. And if you listen closely enough, you will probably realize, holy shit, I have a solution for this person because I've identified a problem as a creative. That is an essential skill that we have, which allows us to continuously create and create and create. So in a networking space, go in, drop the labels, drop what you are, drop your I help statement, and focus on your values. Like I usually tell my mentees, like, how can you boldly express what you give a fuck about? So usually when I go into networking spaces, I'm like, hey, I'm Sway GT and I give a fuck about X, Y, and Z. I really care about this, is this. What I really want to see in the world is this, is this. I'm not talking about what I do or what I like doing. What I'm talking about are my values, my interests. That in itself creates this beautiful space with the other person to invite them as well to share, like, what do you care about? That creates an organic conversation where both people are invested in each other instead of looking at each other as a B2B transaction right from the get-go. That is one tip that I have seen create a significant shift. Another tip, which is if you're creative and you're obviously going to be doing a lot of thought leadership work, when you're going to spaces like events, right? When you're meeting the hosts, when you're being part of collaborations, ask yourself, how can I invest myself into this collaborator? How can I invest myself into this collaborator by creating an opportunity for this collaborator as well to show up in my space? And again, it's from that place of how can I create a conscious relationship instead of looking at this as a business transaction? And how can I leverage this as a marketing tactic, if that makes sense? So those are my 2 tips.
Yeah, networking with the intent to help and serve somebody else always ends up on giving you more meaningful relationships that will generate so much more for you than just money. You know, there'll be resources, there'll be people that will become part of your tribe. And, you know, it's just a whole different level of connection with people if you come into that space with this kind of mentality already.
Yes, absolutely.
So your business caters to a very specific group of individuals, that heart-centered, impact-driven, creative visionaries. What drew you to work specifically with that demographic, and how do you make sure that your service resonate with that such a unique client?
I think the people that I work with are such deep reflections of me 80% of the time, or even 95% of the time. Like my mentees, they tend to be like an exact replica of who I was maybe like 2 years or 5 years ago. And I think that is the beauty of what I'm attracting. I'm really attracting people who kind of carry different facets of me, and they're just, on the path of becoming their own sway, just the way I'm on the path to becoming my own Zendaya, or my, whoever that I kind of admire in the world. And I think that's where the coherence and the resonance really stays in my tribe. In terms of how do I create services, so I kind of make sure that no matter what venture I'm in, no matter what products or services I create, that the intention is that I focus on individual evolution first and then collective evolution. So that means I don't hold myself back or bracket myself and like, oh, okay, so this is the exact, blueprint that I need to stick to because these are the things that my people want from me. I believe in two things. One, that if I'm pouring into myself, I will have enough to pour into my people. So I don't hold myself back from creating a service or product that maybe nobody expects from me. Because I believe that if I'm feeling called to create an offering or a product that is coming from a place of like, it's really intriguing me, it's making me curious, it deserves to go out into the world and allow it to, play about into my tribe. And oftentimes I've noticed when I've followed that listening of like, create whatever the fuck you want to create, Sway, people always tune into it because they're excited, they're curious to see like, oh, what is she up to now? And I think it's also the factor, specifically with the kind of brand that I've created, because I show up very, very raw. I show up very raw. Like, I don't try to hide the fact that I'm a mess. I don't try to hide the fact that, I've got multiple things going on and it can be overwhelming, but also it just fuels me so much. And I think I bring that representation of, do it messy. Do it messy, you will still thrive. There's so much pleasure in the chaos as a creative. And I think the representation that I did not see while growing up was that when I saw creatives, I didn't see that messy part of themselves because they were trying to, in some way or the other, adhere to the society's thing of like artists and creatives need to be like pristine. They need to look, like perfect. They need to look clean. And there's this like, minimal trend that would kind of go around. Whereas my thing has always been like, I'm just chaotically, audaciously showing up. And that has allowed for my tribe to feel so connected to me because they see that, holy shit, like this is what we're doing as well. So my services and products often resonates with them because of that reflection factor of like they are seeing themselves in me in many ways.
Hey, wedding photographers and event planners. Say goodbye to time chaos with Timeline Pro. Our app turns your workflow into a breeze, letting you create and customize stunning wedding day timelines in minutes. Share them with clients and vendors for instant feedback, all within the app. No more endless emails and coordinating headaches. With our easy-to-use templates, shot list tracker, and sunset timings, your planning becomes as joyful as the events you're crafting. Dive into a stress-free planning experience and make every wedding a masterpiece. Download Timeline Pro now and transform the way you plan weddings and events. For more, visit timelineproapp.com. So you talk about this concept of iconic identities. So can you explain a little bit more about the process, what it involves to help your client find that, and why is that crucial for their success?
I believe that every single one of us is so unique, even if, for example, I'm an amateur photographer and I have like a very specific aesthetic, and maybe another amateur photographer could have that very specific aesthetic as well. But the way we see that art and direct that art and then capture that art is always going to be different. And I think that in itself makes that uniqueness, that in itself says a lot about our presence. So when I talk about the iconic identity, I usually talk about the multipotent identity. The multipotent identity is the identity that recognizes the multiple potentials that we have within ourselves, and that the fact that we are inherently without labels, without titles. We are ever evolving. So this is where I like to bring the topic of purpose. A lot of times as creatives, we often go like, what is my purpose? And it has become such a buzzword over the many years. I love to go back to the word at the beginning of the word. What is the etymology? What is the real meaning of purpose? So if you go back to the 16th century, there was a philosopher, I forget his name, but he specifically, when he was talking about purpose, he talked about the word in the sense where he was sharing that purpose looks very different every day, every moment of our life. So if we apply that today, where especially as creatives, we have to understand that our purpose is ever evolving. Purpose is not one calling, one thing, that one specific thing, which again goes back to the whole idea of why creatives inherently are anti-niche. Creatives inherently don't have a niche, is because our purpose is ever evolving. It molds as we react to our experiences with our art, with our world, with our environment. So when we take that into account, that our purpose is ever evolving, how can our identity not be ever evolving? Now that it confirms that our identity is ever evolving, how can we create a brand? How can we create a presence that anchors people no matter how much we evolve? I want to bring an example. When we first connected, I actually had a business called Way to Success. I burned that to the ground earlier this year. I had that business for 7 years. I had solid clients. I had such a good relationship with the environment that I created, the different projects that I created from Way to Success. But I had an underbubbling feeling that I have graduated from Way to Success. Like I no longer need Way to Success. And I think it's a very difficult decision when you are an entrepreneur and you've created this project that you've spent so much time on to move away from it. Because there's that little bit of guilt, like, oh my God, like how's it going to affect me in this way or that way, especially in the logistics. But I just couldn't keep up with it anymore. I was like, no, this doesn't feel as aligned with me anymore. And I need to get out of it. I need to move out of this space. I burned it to the ground and I let go of all of my clients. And I just told them like, I trust in the fact that the way I'm going to evolve is going to serve you better. So please, I will understand if you don't want to work with me after I announce my evolution of wherever that direction is, but this is the decision that I need to take. And so I have to let you go. My clients, they were so gracious with me. They were so gracious. The love was so apparent because I've built a tribe that believes in me because I believe in them. So my clients were like, we trust you. Let us know when your next evolution comes through. I sent out a mass email when everything was set up and I knew the direction that I want to go in. I would say out of the 80% of the clients that I let go, 75 came back. And they, again, bought the new service, bought the new product that I had created. And when I got on the first call with each one of them, they almost had the most similar thing to say. And that was, we trust you. We trust you because you've shown us the realest parts of what it's like to be a multidimensional creative visionary and in the in-between moments through and through. And so we trust you that what you've created by pouring into yourself and honoring yourself will honor us 10 times more in this space. And I think that reminded me of my iconic identity, where I anchored into creating a brand that is so based on me instead of what I do, what I create. And it's so based on my fluidity, my multidimensionality, that the people who are in my space, they naturally gravitated in the new spaces that I created. So what I mean by the iconic identity here is anchoring into your truth, your expression as an artist, as a creative, rather than the actual art that you create. Because the art that you create are fragments of yourself that goes out into the world. But what remains is your expression, your values, the reason why you're creating art. You know, as a photographer, why do we take pictures? What about that moment looked so necessary that called us to like, oh, we need to capture it. So yeah, I think that is where the iconic identity really comes into play.
Yeah, so continuing to going back to really understanding who you are, what do you stand for, all those things, and kind of building your brand around that and not necessarily the product or service that you have. Yeah, very good. So let's talk about sustainability and income diversification, because those are hot topics in entrepreneurship in general. Can you share some strategies or maybe some advice for some entrepreneurs looking to explore these paths, like having multiple businesses and, having multiple income streams and things like that?
So, first with sustainability, I think a lot of times when entrepreneurs, well, business owners, before they become entrepreneurs, they often go with the idea of like, oh, let me just create one thing and then I'll think about the other things that I want to do. Doing that will make you reach burnout even more than you running multiple things, because the idea of not implementing something, especially implementing an idea that has been in your head for so long, will drive you insane and will keep being there at the back of your head going like, no, but I want to, I'm not want to. And it comes back to feeling unfulfilled. So if you're thinking about sustainability, you have to think sustainability from the lens of your unconventional path. So break it down for yourself. What are the things that you really want to create? What are non-negotiable things that you really want to create? Not all ideas need to happen today, right? Not all ideas, not all ventures need to happen today, to be built today. But there are some that you have to commit yourself to, because something in you is telling you that I have to do this. Commit yourself to them. It can be three different things at the same time, four different things at the same time. Commit yourself to them. Second, once you've committed yourself to them, ask yourself, what does sustainability for you look like? Because oftentimes when creatives, specifically creatives, and this is going to sound like a call out, like I'm calling people out, but it is the truth. We don't think about sustainability when we first start our businesses, because we're like, oh, you know what? I'll think about it when I, get my first income here, when I do this here. It's ridiculous. We are, just because we are creatives, it does not change the facts. It does not change the fact that we are running businesses. It doesn't change the fact that we are looking at profit, not revenue, profit. And these are certain terms like in sustainability that people forget, like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to focus on getting that, breaking even, making the revenue here. Sustainability focuses on profit, long-term profit. And if you don't think about sustainability from the get-go, which a lot of business coaches don't think about, they tell you like, you know what, we will talk about sustainability after you have, reached your first 5 clients, first 10 clients, then we can think about scaling. No, you need to have your scaling plan right now when you start. What does that scaling plan look like? And why is it that you want to scale in that way? And matching that with the ideal desire of what your profits look like, not your income, what your profits look like. That means how much of it you take out into your pocket, minus the taxes, minusing your day-to-day stuff, minusing to everything. That is what matters. So there is a lot of numbers game that you have to be committed to when you're doing multiple ventures, because as being multidimensional entrepreneurs or multi-passionate entrepreneurs, this is where it gets tricky for us in comparison to people who have just one businesses. They can prioritize sustainability later because they're going down one specific dedicated path. We aren't. And because our time, interest, focus is divided, we need to have everything planned, almost like tools that we will use as we go down the lane. So my first advice for sustainability is, what is sustainability to you? Don't focus on what the society is telling you or what, your traditional business coach is telling you. No, you need to break down what is sustainability for you as a creative to sustain yourself and your business, because these are two very different things. Sustaining yourself is a different thing. Sustaining your business is a different thing. And that means looking at your lifestyle first approach. This is what I love saying. With sustainability, it's lifestyle first approach. How can you create your businesses, your ventures around your life so that it's easy for you to show up? You don't want it to be, a point where you reach in your business where you're exhausted by just the idea of like, oh my God, I need to do this. Whether it's marketing, whether it's content, whether it's showing up for an event, it should not feel like, oh my God, I need to show up now. It should feel easy. And it will only feel easy when you have a plan in place to sustain yourself and your business. So that's number one, sustainability. With the diversification of income, I say there are 2 types of multi-passionate people. So you need to recognize which kind you are. The first is you have multiple different interests that kind of don't connect with each other. The second is you have one interest, but you have so many different ways of looking at that one interest. So to give you an example, you could be a writer, but you as a writer, you write multiple different genres. That is one type of multi-passionate, because that means you're tapping into different audiences. So then your mission would be, as a passionate entrepreneur, how can you create a brand that taps into all these different genres, these different audiences that love that are gravitated to those genres? Then the first kind of multi-passionate that has different interests altogether, you have to focus on what are those different interests and which of them are the ones that you actually want to turn into an income stream. Because not everything that interests us is inevitably something that we want to make money out of. There are some things that are just for us, and then there are some things that we want to do out for the world. So here, once you recognize what kind of multi-passionate you are, you can start thinking about how do you want to create income and how do you want to diversify your income. The first place I always tell my mentees to start with is create a list of things. No matter how silly this is, create a list of things. And these are specifically ideas. Like you thought about it, maybe like, you were in the toilet and you were just thinking about something and it just came to your head. And pop it down on the list. All those ideas, pop it down on the list. When you have all of these things in the list, you will start seeing that some of them are very similar. So similar that they cannot be two separate things. When you start seeing that, you can start creating clusters of like this cluster of ideas can become one thing. I can create this one thing from it. This cluster of idea can become one thing. So depending on what kind of multi-passionate brand you create, whether it's one interest diverging into many other or multiple interests, you have these clusters that you can work with. Once you have these clusters, the next thing is to ask yourself, how do you want to create it? Forget about the way people tell you to do offers. I always tell my mentees, if you have ideas and you have these clusters now ready to be turned into an offer or a product, don't take the conventional path just because. And this is probably like for some of my graphic designers, like most of my some of my mentees, they would come in and they would be a graphic designer because society was like, it would be best if you just show up as a graphic designer because you have this great way of creating illustrations. They come in, they start working with me, and then we have them up in galleries. We have them in retreats. We have them in different spaces. Why is that? Because we're stripping away the titles and we're focusing on the clusters. So giving you one example, which is like one of my graphic designer clients, she came in and she was like, I'm just tired. I'm not just a graphic designer. I don't like it. I was like, okay, let's see what we can do. What we recognized was that her skill sets as a creative branched out more than her illustrations. We got to the root of what makes her uniquely creative. Then we understood that she wanted to create her art to be in places that activates an experience. That means her whole brand was that she creates different genres of art that are put in specific places that allows people to really deeply contemplate. So we had this idea of like, okay, why don't we, reach out to traditional galleries, and then we reach out to, specific collaborators who are doing high-end luxurious events. And when we did that, we went down the road of how retreats, especially facilitated retreats, they're always looking for very specific artwork that will enrich their experience or their space. So that's where her art would come in. And she would go and she would share about her art, and she would kind of host this mini facilitation through her art of like a reflection work, a contemplation work. There, she diversified herself as an artist through the galleries and through the thing. And then she also had private clients that would come and buy her art. And she would also do custom. So already that's 4 different ideas, 4 different ways that she diversified her income stream as an illustrator, going away from the whole graphic designer conventional norm. So that's how I would say those 2 things flow.
Very good. Yeah, I really love the concept of making sure that you incorporate your life, what do you want your life to look like when you're thinking about sustainability for your business. That's something I go over with my clients as well, because we forget we're focused so much in business sometimes that we forget that the business should be working for me to have the life I want and not the other way around. So bringing that back into the concept of sustainability, very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned this concept of following the whispers of potential. Elaborate a little bit more on that philosophy for me and maybe give us an example.
Oh my gosh, I love this because this is my trademark that I am if I wasn't an artist, if I didn't have these other labels, what would I call myself? I would call myself as an individual who follows the whispers of potential. Ever since I was a little kid, I was 10 years old and I already mentioned the classroom incident. But when I was 10, I had this thing where I used to love writing, but I didn't write like as a journal. I didn't write in a diary. I would write like these grandiose stories, which I don't even know how they came to be. So I created this like alien-esque story. And I was 10 years old. Keep this in mind. I was 10. I created this alien-esque story and I wrote like the first chapter. I had a couple of classmates who were like, oh, Sway, we want to see, we want to read. So they borrowed, I made copies. I made copies of my first chapter. They took the copies, they read it, they came back and they were like, oh my God, when is the second chapter going to come? Before I knew it, like by the time I reached my third or fourth chapter, I had seniors who were like 3, 4 grades above me who were like, when is the next chapter coming out? I'm like, I'm just 10. I am just doing what I want to do. Like, I'm just playing around. And that was like the first moment I was like, oh, okay. Like, if I didn't even put much effort into this and, this is happening. So I was like, okay, let me try introducing, would people pay me for this? As a kid, I was like, would people pay me for this? One of my seniors who was waiting for like I think the 8th chapter at that point, he was like, I will pay you if you give me first dibs. That means like before anybody else, like you give me. And I was like, huh, okay. And that was like one income stream that I already made. I was like, okay. And I started telling everybody, if you want dibs, I'm making a list, but you have to pay this much. I think I was charging like $10 to get first dibs. And so it was so interesting. That kind of led me, like I would listen to potential. Sometimes the best ideas are co-creative ideas with our environments. So what I mean is that you listen to the environment. I followed the idea of creating a story. I had no expectations. But then the next thing that happened as I was creating the idea was I was noticing the curiosity. I was listening to the curiosity that people had around me. So I followed that. I followed the whisper that told me there's potential here if you fulfill their curiosity. I was like, okay, let's do this. Then once the curiosity was being catered to, I listened to the potential of like, how can we make this bigger? How can we expand this? I then listened to that. Then when it became expanded, then I listened to the potential because I could see people were telling me and I could see from the environment that the interest was so much that they were ready to pay. I was like, okay, I'm going to listen to this. So that's like a real life example as a 10-year-old, how I was listening to the whispers of potential. Now, fast forward to how did I listen to this potential when I was in my teens? So I graduated with double majors with honors as a psychologist and as an English literature and language major. Everybody told me, and I went to University of Cambridge. Everybody told me, don't. You're setting your sights too high. But throughout my studies as a child, even before it was time for me to go to university, all I saw in my environment was that everybody kept on telling me, everybody kept on responding back to me and affirming that I have more potential than this current environment was giving me. So I knew I had to aim higher. That was the first potential that I heard. So I prepped myself up. I had a career counselor who I told, like, okay, this is what I want to do. She basically told me, that's an Ivy League university. It's hard to get into that. I said, I will get into that because I know how I want to get into that. I have a very specific plan. I'm listening to the potential and I know this potential is going to work. She told me have backup plans. I was like, no, I'm not going to have backup plans. And it was very interesting because I left home at 15. I experienced homelessness for almost 7 months. And then I went couch surfing from friend to friend before I finally moved into the dorms. But I still stuck to my decision. I was like, nope, I'm still going to go into this university. I could have easily, saved myself from all the hassle and moved into a different, chosen a different university that would have, easily accepted me because I was a very devoted student. Let's just say that. But I didn't compromise. And so one day the admissions called, they couldn't reach my phone number. I had my friend listed as an emergency contact. my friend got the call and they were like, the admissions are calling you. At that time, I didn't have the funds. I didn't have the funds to pay for my education. My parents were already like, okay, if you want to go your way, go your way. We're not going to support you with that. But I was still determined. I was like, I'm going to fucking do this. Like, this is what I want to do. I think that was the biggest risk I took on myself. I took a risk on myself. And so I went to the admissions. I was very honest with them and I was like, listen, I can't. What's the way that we can go about this? They said we can give you a scholarship, but it would be like a 50% scholarship. We can't give you a 100% scholarship. I was like, okay, I will figure something out. As soon as I left campus, I had a couple of friends who were being picked up by their family. And one of their, I think it was an uncle of one of my friends, he had an event company and he was looking for help. And him and I were just talking, and then he was telling me like, "Oh, this is the event. And this is what we're thinking." And I started giving my ideas randomly. I'm 15, but I'm just there. I'm talking to a whole grown ass man, and I'm like, "Oh, we could do this. We could do this, and like you could do this as well. You could do." He's like, "How about I pay you £100 like for an hour, and you come work with me for 2 days for my event?" I listened to that potential. I listened to that potential. I went there. And slowly but surely, I found multiple different ways. I actually did so many part time jobs that eventually I was able to fund my 50%. And then the university helped me fund the rest of the 50% by giving me a scholarship. That led me down to my career. I had a private practice as a psychologist. And I felt unfulfilled because I had so many other ideas. People around me were like, no, but you're doing so well. Why do you want to change lanes? I'm like, no, but I want to. I want to. I want to. I got invited by one of my parents who was hosting like a conference. And he was like, I would love for you to just come and share your thoughts. I went just before I went on the stage. I changed my entire speech because the speech was supposed to be more related to like the psychological impacts of being a creative and very strategical, very psychoanalytical. Just before I could hear as I saw the crowd and I was just looking at the different people, and because I'm so used to reading behavior, body language, and kind of translating that, and I just watched people and I was like, no, 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 these people want something different. I listened to that whisper of potential, told the event manager, like, told the conference manager, I'm gonna do this, something else. I went on the stage, didn't have anything. Didn't have anything. There were like maybe like 30,000 people present there. I didn't have anything. And I was just like, I'm just gonna flow and see what happens. I went on the stage and I started talking about just owning your shit and being. I basically talked about following the whispers of potential. Exactly this. I was like, and I kind of shared a little bit here and there about like how I myself at that point, I was thinking about shifting careers. As soon as I got off the stage, a man who was sitting in that audience, he came up to me. He's like, I wanted to talk to you. What are your thoughts about starting a creative agency? I will be an investor. I was just flabbergasted because I'm like, what? Like just by that one speech? And that's how Kaleidoscopic Vision, my creative agency, came to be. And he was an angel investor. He supported me through and through. He was like, whatever your ideas are, let's do that. And I had a very unconventional way. We reached our 6 figures within 3 months, so I was able to pay him back and then some and still have like sole ownership of the shares that he had. And so that's kind of where, that's the example of like what I've been doing. I listen to the environment, I watch the environment, I pay attention to not only what's happening up here, but also based on my reactions, what have I understood? A lot of times the environment reacts, but we don't read into it. We don't read into the reactions of the environment. And that is my way of market research. Whispers of Potential is essentially like the foundational level of market research, which is listening to what the environment says. And that's kind of where, I've been led to doing whatever I do in a nutshell.
Love that. I love that. That's amazing. Thanks for sharing all those stories with us. These are great examples, and I'm sure people really have a good, clear understanding of what that means. It's basically being observant and being open to new possibilities, seeing the potential in things, using that entrepreneur mindset and, just not be afraid of taking that leap. So I would love for you to tell our audience where to find you if they want to work with you, if they want to learn more about what you have to offer. So tell them where to find you.
Yes, if you enjoyed this conversation, I would love to invite you into my playground. You can just search me anywhere. If you just Google Sway GT, I'm everywhere, I promise. It's not that hard to find me. Second, at the moment, the best place to connect with me and dive into my world is my Instagram or my YouTube. I love creating content from the space of following the whispers of potential. So if you liked that concept, there's a lot that just goes on here that I know that I have no other place to put into. And it's mostly to really get you out of the gears of your creative space and to lead you into that visionary leadership space. So if that's the space that you feel like you're being called towards, where you want to create a brand that allows you to show up as you are and still have people who are ready to be like, take my fucking money, whether it's venture A or venture B or venture C, then, and consume my content, enjoy my content, play with my content, and allow that to be the reflection point for you to be redirected into the spaces that you want to go. So yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll make sure we link all the sites for them on the show notes. Thank you so much for spending the time with us today. I know they got a lot of great stuff from everything you shared. We appreciate having you here.
Thank you so much for having me. This was such a blast. I really enjoyed my time here with you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we'll see you next week for another episode of the Accidental CEO podcast. Bye. And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Accidental CEO podcast. Thanks for hanging out with us in the world where creativity and business strategy collide. I am Nada Salvatore, thrilled to have shared this time with you. Remember, every episode is a step closer to mastering the art of being an accidental CEO. So don't miss out. Hit subscribe, drop us a sweet review, and spread the word to your creative tribe. Your next big breakthrough could be just one episode away. Join us next time for more insights, laughs, and actionable tips. Keep pushing boundaries, dreaming big, and embracing the beautiful chaos of entrepreneurship. Here's to make magic happen in your business and beyond.